kiddos. Since I'm out today, I'm going to do video notes with you guys. Please make sure you watch these. I'll be checking to ensure that you did. We're going to go over the Declaration of Independence today. So yesterday, a little recap, we went over some of the important documents that the founders utilized when they're in the room creating the Constitution of our country. And so after the Enlightenment, or with the Enlightenment, they were reading heavily in them, but they also were looking at different documents. And a reminder, the first one on here, they didn't really have to go over it with you guys. Codes of Hammurabi was the first set of written laws in human history. So that is important, but our founders didn't actually utilize them. The Magna Carta was one of the first attempts at limiting the government. An attempt is the key word there. It didn't actually do it. It was royals keeping other royals in line. Well, they're really not going to do that. But it was significant because it was the first attempt at kind of reeling in that absolute monarch mindset. And then you had the Glorious Revolution. Told you guys, the most boring revolution in history. You've got the British got a new king and queen, and it led to the most influential document out of the ones we've talked about so far. So the English Bill of Rights, 1689. Gave us things like monarchs nobody's above the rule of law. They have to ask Parliament or their version of Congress for help. Everybody gets a trial by jury that happens quickly. You're not just jailed for a very long time. All of that leads to that bottom one you see right there where it says limited government. That's a term you're going to want to underline, highlight, whatever you need to do in your notes. And then we talked about how those ideas came over with the settlers and eventually into the colonies, and how the war broke out, not because of taxation, but because of without that representation part. Remember that. And then we left off with the purpose of declaring independence and the purpose of the Declaration of Independence, which was to tell why we're revolting, why we are declaring our independence from Great Britain. And that brings us to kind of our introduction, our breakdown of the Declaration of Independence, because it is one of the most significant documents in our nation's history. And I always talk about it as like a breakup text or a breakup in general. There are 4 parts to the Declaration. The first part's the preamble. That's like so we need to talk. And then you have the Declaration of Natural Rights, and this is where you're expressing the things that you need. So like, I'm not myself and everyone sees it. This is how I'm feeling. Then you have the list of grievances. This is what annoys me about you. And what I find amazing, there are 28 of these things. 28 things that we found wrong. Imagine if you're in a breakup and the person handed you a paper that was 28 things that they thought was wrong with you. It'd be a little devastating. Probably make you mad. And then you have the Resolution of Independence, where we're breaking up, and sorry but not sorry, this is what needs to happen. So let's look at these individually. And so in the introduction, like I said, it explains why they wrote the Declaration of Independence. Okay, why? And I love the quote that's there. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve, meaning get rid of, the political bands which connected them to one another. A decent respect of opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separate. That's a fancy way of saying that when you feel oppressed and you feel like there's a struggle, it's okay to dissolve that connection and create something better that has more freedom overall. And so that really laid it down. I always wonder if the king and parliament ever even read past this point. Did they even read past it, or did they just read that part and get really frustrated and say, let's go to war? And then the Declaration of Natural Rights that I've not been feeling myself. This is a list of rights that they believed all citizens should have, and they use the word unalienable, meaning that they are not really negotiable. Like, these are things that have to happen. And when the government's not protecting people's rights, people should be able and can overthrow the government. That should ring a bell. That should bring you back to John Locke. He wrote specifically in that. Thomas Jefferson picked out that point of John Locke and made sure to add that to the Declaration. Again, I talked to you guys about the pettiness yesterday. I'm sure he was petty enough to utilize British Enlightenment, British history against the British when we're separating them, and I love it. And then you also have those quotes there from it. So I'd like for you to take the time to read those as well. So just pause the video, read through them, and then move on. Then you have the list of grievances. Okay, now I want you guys to understand, even though Parliament at this point had really gained a lot of control of decision making in Britain, the colonists laid the blame on the king. They saw the king as the problem, even though Parliament was also the problem. Over the course of the war, you saw Parliament kind of switch. They got real tired of the war. They got tired of how expensive the war was. And so that debate that was raging in Parliament was whether to continue or not. And that eventually became the majority in favor of not having the war anymore. And now there's 28 grievances. I want you to choose 3 as like an example. But these all should sound fairly familiar. And if not, they will when we get into the Constitution unit. The big one, that taxation without that main point representation. Britain was making the military superior to the civil government, which frustrated them. They didn't want anybody above their civil government. They wanted the military to be reeled in just like citizens had to be, and that wasn't the case. They were frustrated that they kept a large standing army all the time in the colonies, and that troops were able to basically say, I live here now. They went into homes and said, I live here now. Invasion of privacy and things like that. Refused colonists to petition and redress their grievances. So when the colonists had issues, they simply just said, meh, we don't care about this. The judges weren't dependent on the rule of law. They were dependent on what the monarch wanted at that particular point. And that's very dangerous. We've talked about how monarch's ultimate decision making can be frustrating. Searches without warrants, searching for contraband without a warrant, and they suspended local laws in favor of just really military martial law, which frustrated them. And it deprived the colonists, some colonists, of that trial by jury, which we talked about the importance of that yesterday. The final section is the most important section, in my opinion, but a lot of historians, that it's where they declare. This is where they physically say, we are declaring our independence. We are free and independent states. And we're no longer going to be a part of you. Now, here's the thing, though. We had to win the war after this. You can declare all you want, but until you actually physically do that thing. You know, I can declare that I have a doctorate, but until I write my dissertation, it means nothing. And so we had to win the war after this. And so it includes the signatures of signers of the Declaration of Independence. The men who signed this, they knew that as soon as they signed it, they were going to be charged with treason if we lost that war. And when they signed it, it wasn't looking good for us. So that was a bold move on their part. It was a revolutionary document. It's the first time that you had a people say, we're done. And it had an influence on future people, future revolution. The French Revolution, even though it got way bloodier than ours, our document influenced them. The Haitian Revolution, and then so many more afterwards, it influenced them. And so in conclusion, these are kind of the main ideas here. Declaration of Independence, government should be based on the consent of the governed, John Locke. Declaration of Independence states that people have the right to overthrow that oppressive government. Oh, look, the Enlightenment's back again. The main purpose of the Declaration is to justify the colonists' revolt against England. And then John Locke's ideas, as you've seen in the conclusion, they contributed to that declaration heavily, as well as documents such as Magna Carta Bill of Rights, as we talked about, setting the principle for the Constitution of the United States. All right, guys, so hopefully you enjoyed something. Sorry I'm not in here to teach today, but I hope you all have a good day. Make sure you get the check for understanding done. Talk with you guys soon.